You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 86 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. Now, I was originally planning to do a mailbag episode next week, which is something I've been talking about doing for quite some time. And there's quite a few emails in there, great emails. Please continue to send them. I will get around to them. But in preparation for next week's episode, I started to go through the emails early, just to sort them in terms of, is it contemporary NBA, is it NBA history, whatever. Some WNBA questions in there too, if you can believe that. There were more WNBA questions than the Big Baller League, or whatever the hell that thing's called. So that's a thumbs up, I guess. But regardless, I couldn't help but notice the amount of emails in relation to next year's free agency, which you'll be aware of this if you've been paying attention. The amount of talent that's going to be available in next year's free agency class. Look, it's hard to even describe it, what the potential ramifications are when you look at the talent that's associated with it. It's truly once in a generation. We saw this in 1996 with a lot of free agents, from Gary Payton to Michael Jordan to Patrick Ewing, Charles Barkley, all these guys. And then you saw it in 2010, obviously with Wade, LeBron, and Chris Bosh going to Miami. But next year's free agency class, everybody seems to be lining up for them. And with the increases to the cap, the salary cap, it feels like nearly every team has the potential to sign a lot of these players. So in years past, it was maybe a third of the teams in the NBA, when these big classes were available, they were able to make a run for it, and the other 2/3 are just hoping that they can hold on to their players or whatever. They're kind of handcuffed by the salary cap. That's no longer the case, and you see so many teams not even really having to clear room. They're clearing room if they want to get 2 or 3 of these guys to the supermax, if the players are eligible for it, of course. But if they want to sign one of these players, most teams they have the flexibility in their cap situation to do so. So today's show. So I'm going to address all of that in today's episode. And the way I'm going to do it is a little bit different to how other podcasts have done it so far, where they've gone through and they've gone through each free agent and they've said the probability of which team they're going to go to. Say for Klay Thompson, for example, they've said, 85% chance that he stays with Golden State. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to make predictions and put my neck out on the line. And I don't like that, because otherwise you're getting a situation where the Lakers or the Knicks are going to be the front runners for every single player. And they're not going to get every single player. They may, if they're lucky, based off their previous history, they may get one. Paul George didn't go there. Kawhi Leonard is now soured. How many free agents in the past have they been able to lure, apart from LeBron? You have to go way back to Shaq. And I just mentioned this a second ago, the 1996 off-season. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say which player is going to go where and where it's all going to land. So let's have fun with this. And of course, we have to begin with Kevin Durant. Now, by this time next year, or a little bit earlier, we could be facing the reality of Kevin Durant winning his 3rd straight NBA title and his 3rd straight Finals MVP. Now, I am not going back. I'm not retracting on what I said about the Rockets beating the Warriors in the conference finals this coming NBA season. I'm sticking with that prediction. But there is a big possibility that the Warriors win. I'm not discounting that. I'm not saying I'm definitely going to be right. God knows how many times I've been wrong doing predictions. But there is a big chance that the Warriors do win. And at what point is Kevin Durant satisfied? He seems a little insecure. I don't want to psychoanalyze him, but it's a little bit difficult to not come to that conclusion when you see his antics on Twitter and Instagram. So I think he wants to be respected. And I think that's fair enough. I mean, he's at the top of his field. I think he's the best player in the NBA. And I think he wants to prove to everybody, not just fans, but, former players or even current players, that he is capable of leading a team that's not as talented as the Warriors to the NBA championship. So, of course, and if he wanted to stick around in Golden State, I know they're starting that new arena in San Francisco and everything like that. That's going to be incredible to see once that's actually opened. But is that enough? Is that enough to keep him around? And at what point does he realize that all his success, and the same goes for Steph Curry, by the way, but those two essentially cannibalize their legacies. They cannot go further than the other one now. They're almost tied at the hip. It's not a Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar argument when one was in their prime and the other one carried the other. Whether it was Kareem early with Magic and then Magic later on with Kareem. It's not that situation. The situation you have is two guys in their prime. Steph Curry won MVPs and he won a championship without Kevin Durant. So even though Kevin Durant is the more versatile scorer and the more explosive scorer, the better defender, no matter what he does in Golden State alongside Steph Curry, he will always be tied to that. And him leaving, when I say him, of course I'm referring to Kevin Durant, if he left and he won, it will essentially validate winning for him the same way that LeBron James validated himself without the emotional aspect of winning in Cleveland. Because if LeBron had never won in Cleveland, we would always say, well, he couldn't win without Dwayne Wade. Now we say he can't win without Dwayne Wade or Kyrie Irving. Whether that's fair or not, I seem to think that there is some validity to that. Regardless, the point that I'm making is Kevin Durant's probably weighing all that up in his mind. And that's the reason why he hasn't signed an extension. So what are his options? Does he go to San Antonio? He is from Texas. People always bring up when someone's from LA or New York that, hey, they're a free agent. Why don't they go to the Lakers? Why don't they go to the Knicks? Kevin Durant could well go to the Spurs. And if he goes to the Spurs, look, we shouldn't be surprised by that. Remember, LaMarcus Aldridge was the prized jewel in a free agent class. I can't remember which year it was. 2014, 2015, I think it was, actually. And, yeah, it was 2015, excuse me. And the Spurs, they got him. So they do have a track record of getting the prize jewel in the free agency. Now, whether Kevin Durant wants to go there is another question. What do they have to offer him? Well, if they can keep DeRozan, if they can keep Lamar Aldridge, that's a pretty good opportunity. That's a pretty good landing spot because nobody is even though they're both all-stars, nobody is accusing these guys of being a top 5 player in the league, or at least a top 10 player in the league. Top 15, yeah, you can make that argument for LaMarcus Aldridge. Top 20, clearly for DeMar DeRozan. I mean, they're almost interchangeable at that point too. You could argue DeRozan is top 15 and LaMarcus Aldridge is top 20. Regardless, that is the exact type of supporting cast that you would want to surround Kevin Durant with, because who would get all the credit if they win? It would be Kevin Durant, and to a lesser extent, it would be Popovich. Now, the biggest problem for the Spurs in this situation would be salary cap. They would have to get rid of Pau Gasol, and they would have to probably part ways with Patty Mills. So those are two players that they would have to offload somewhere along the line in order to clear up that space. And it's not a question of if they want to do that. It's more of a question along the lines of, can they do that? Who would be willing to take them? Now, of course, the other option that everyone loves to talk about is the Lakers now with LeBron. Now, the problem that Durant would fall into is if he goes from Golden State to the Lakers, even at LeBron's advanced age, who do you think would get the credit if the Lakers with Kevin Durant and LeBron James, and potentially another one too, if they're able to pull a Houdini out and really reverse their fortunes and get two big free agents in one offseason. But even if it's just Durant and LeBron, and they win the title, whether it's the next season or the season after, who gets the credit? And he's in exactly the same situation as he is now in Golden State. So unless if there's some huge deal under the table with Nike in order to clear that roadblock to the finals for LeBron by eliminating the Warriors and Kevin Durant, that dynasty, I can't see him going to LA. Now, another team that's been thrown out there is the Knicks. Now, I could see that once again, but only if Nike throws a huge amount of money at him to go there. Then you could create this East-West rivalry between the two biggest cities, the two biggest markets, New York and LA, and the two biggest names in basketball, LeBron and Kevin Durant. You could have those two guys go at it, and what company is associated selling shoes? I mean, I hate the fact that shoe companies have this kind of sway in manipulating the NBA. It's almost like professional wrestling. It really is. Well, how could we come up with the best storylines? No, I hate that. I really hate it, but it's the reality of the sport is we have to pay attention to this, because otherwise we're going to be sitting there scratching our heads thinking, how did this happen? But in terms of New York, look, Porzingis is there. Who else? They have some young players. They may get Jimmy Butler, but if they get Jimmy Butler, I don't think they have the money to bring in a Kevin Durant. They may try to get a Kyrie Irving. He's going to be a free agent that we're going to talk about in a minute. So I've got to be realistic here, and I think San Antonio is the best option. Now, of course, the other option is to stay in Golden State, and this is the part that I really hate, is having to try to psychoanalyze these players and figure out what their motivations are. Is Kevin Durant's motivations for his legacy, or is it just win, baby? You know, to quote the great Al Davis. And he seems comfortable winning, but at some point, you know, does he get a bit of an itch to scratch and go elsewhere? And that's what it comes down to. So the two front runners in my mind are San Antonio or Golden State. And unless something big happens, such as Steph Curry getting injured for an entire playoff run and most of the season, and Kevin Durant still leading them, he cannot answer that question as to whether he was good enough to lead a team without Steph Curry. Now, if he just wants to win, then to hell with everything else. He could end up with 6 or 7 championships. He really could. And would he be willing to throw that away in order to accept the challenge of leading a team by himself, truly by himself, with not a whole lot of consistent supporting cast? I would like to think that he would take that challenge for the NBA's sake, but it will be very interesting. So my prediction is that he goes to San Antonio. Now I just mentioned his name a second ago, so we may as well go with him. Let's go with Kyrie Irving. And a lot of this is going to be dependent on how well Boston does in the playoffs this year, if they're healthy, if he's healthy. Because I remember the list that he came up with, or was at least leaked out to the media when he demanded a trade from Cleveland. And if memory serves me correct, New York was one of them. We all know he's from New Jersey, which is just across the river. And I believe the other team was San Antonio. Now, I don't think he would go back to San Antonio. Well, he was never there in the first place, but I don't think he would want to be San Antonio. I think his two best options will be either New York or Boston. Now, it's such a difficult thing to, because once again, what does he value? If he values winning or leading a team to a title just to prove to everybody that, hey, it was me that led the team in 2016 to the title. It wasn't LeBron, it was me. I should have been given that loyalty, not him, because look, he left anyway. So by default, he's probably right. But at that stage, you had to go with LeBron because, in the eyes of many, myself included, he was the most critical aspect of them winning that title. Kyrie Irving was a very close second, don't get me wrong, but LeBron was the catalyst of that. But the point I'm trying to make is, in Kyrie Irving's mind, he probably feels that he should have been the one that the Cavs sided with, but they sided with LeBron. So he wants to lead a team to a title, with himself being the focal point, and his best opportunity to do that is in Boston. There is no question about that. Now, if Boston wins the title, which is a big probability, well, probably not anymore, actually, the more I think about it, because I just predicted them in the preview podcast with JC, available in the archives, by the way. But if they do win the title, then is Kyrie Irving, in his mind, is he going to say, well, I've accomplished what I wanted to do here in Boston. Now I want to go essentially back home, or as close as home, because there's no longer the New Jersey Nets, then the Brooklyn Nets. So he can't go back to play for the Nets. I don't even think he was a Nets fan growing up. He could have been, I don't know. But regardless, if the Celtics win, ironically, that may hurt their chances to re-sign Kyrie Irving. Because, as I said, Kyrie Irving might look at it as a situation where he wants to just win one ring without LeBron, with himself as the man, and then move along. And that puts the Celtics in a hell of a spot, because if they feel that they cannot re-sign this guy, Danny Ainge has shown ruthless aggression, to use the WWE term. That's 2 wrestling references in one episode. But he has shown ruthless aggression in trading away players that he feels that he cannot sign, whether it's Isaiah Thomas or whoever. And the team has benefited immensely from that. So maybe, just maybe, everybody's looking at Kawhi Leonard, who we'll get to in a second as well. They're looking at Kawhi Leonard as being a movable piece for the Raptors if they feel that they cannot re-sign him. Maybe we're overlooking the possibility that situation happens in Boston as well. And that will open up everything. Everything is on the table then. Because especially if you're the Knicks, I mean, do you make a move for that, or do you hold out? Do you like your chances in competing with a team like Boston and the talent that they have and the mystique that they have in free agency? Or do you make your move prior to the trade deadline to bring him in, just like they did with Carmelo Anthony? And we know how that worked out. They pretty much nerfed their entire team, trading Gallinari and other players with lots of talent. And they ended up with no one to surround Melo with until they were able to bring in some defensive stars from the Mavericks team that won the title, in Tyson Chandler and also Jason Kidd, although Jason Kidd was way past his prime at that stage. But at that point, that's all they could surround him with, and that's when they had their most success since Patrick Ewing was on their team. So the point that I'm really trying to make here, I know I'm rambling on here, is it's going to be a war between these two teams for Kyrie Irving. It's going to be a bidding war. And once again, it comes down to what Kyrie Irving wants and what he values. Does he want to be known as a guy that went back to his team and did what Stephon Marbury was unable to do? And what Carmelo Anthony was labeled as a hometown guy, but he's actually from Baltimore. So that was always interesting to me, but he was labeled as the hometown savior, coming back to resurrect the Knicks, just like Marbury. Neither of them were truly able to do it. Is that challenge? I mean, Kyrie Irving has often looked to be the guy, or one of the guys along with Russell Westbrook, that embraces challenges from this generation. So there's a big possibility that he goes to New York. I do have to make a prediction, and I think that he stays in Boston. I could be proven totally wrong with that, though. But I just don't see how you can turn down playing with with the talent level that they have. Because forget for a minute the Al Horfords and the Gordon Haywards and the Marcus Smarts and the Marcus Morrises. Just forget about those guys for a second. And look at the young talent, not the veteran talent, but the young talent in Jaylen Brown, in Jason Tatum, in Rozier. And then they've got the pick from the Kings coming up, who they don't look like they're going to be, making the playoffs. So that'll be another lottery pick that they've got. Just think about that for a second, and that's what you would be leaving. I mean, we could see a 2-year deal happen where Kyrie Irving wants to see how good these guys can become, and he's willing to give it 2 more years to play alongside some of these guys. And then he may go to New York. I think he will finish his career in New York. It's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of if Boston can hold on to him. I think they are able to hold on to him, and that's my prediction. He stays in Boston. Now we get to the real tricky part, and that's Kawhi Leonard. And I hate to keep referencing the preview podcast that I did with JC, but the question mark I had was with Kawhi Leonard. Does he actually finish the season out in Toronto? And it's a flip of the coin with that, let alone does he start next season with him. I don't think there's much of a chance that happens, but you never know. I mean, we all thought that Paul George was gone after they were bounced by Utah in the first round. And the way that happened, especially with him having a poor game on the road in Game 6 and a poor series. Honestly, a poor season in relation to his standards. And lo and behold, there he is coming back. So we never know with these. But I would say that Kawhi Leonard wants to be we know he's been a Finals MVP, but that was on a Spurs team that did have a bunch of Hall of Famers, albeit not in their prime, but that was a very balanced attack, and he won that off his defense. He was also an MVP candidate a couple of years back, and he's won Defensive Player of the Year a few years in a row. So his talent is unquestionable. The question that comes up with him is, can he lead his team to a title or to the NBA Finals? And in Toronto, I don't think he's got much of a chance. I mean, the only thing going for him is a weak Eastern Conference. But does he stay with the Raptors for that? I don't think so. I just can't see that happening. And I think the options, obviously, that everybody's mind is the Lakers. That's the number one option. I don't think that happens. I think he's the type of guy that wants to beat LeBron. He's done it before. He's won Finals MVP up against LeBron. Deservedly so. People might want to question the Iguodala MVP. And once again, I've been on record saying I would have voted for LeBron to win Finals MVP in 2015. But in 2014, Kawhi kicked his ass. Absolutely demolished LeBron. He made LeBron look silly. And if you want to just look at the stats, please don't look at games 1 and 2, because that's before they started really attacking LeBron with Kawhi Leonard. When they started attacking LeBron with Kawhi Leonard, they forced LeBron off him, and then that really opened up everything. Of course, the addition of Boris Diaw into the lineup, as opposed to Thiago Splitter, that really made a difference too. But once they put the ball in Kawhi Leonard's hands, and LeBron didn't want any piece of that, that's when we saw Kawhi Leonard average, 23, 24 points per game of incredible shooting numbers. Look at games 3, 4, and 5. And it's no coincidence that the Spurs blew them out by a record margin in those ball games. 2 of which, by the way, were in Miami. Games 3 and 4. That's what was so remarkable about that. The series was tied at 1. It went back to Miami, and the Spurs just took it to the next gear. They went from, honestly, looking like they were stuck in neutral up to the 5th gear. They didn't even go from 1st to 5th. They went from neutral to 5th, and Kawhi Leonard was the man. We all accepted that. So he was a clear, as I said, he has beaten LeBron. He's done it convincingly before. I would like to see him go to a team where he would be challenging LeBron. And I think he has that mindset where he wants to prove to everybody that he is the best two-way player in the league, and what better way than to take down, arguably, the greatest offensive player. So you've got to ask yourself then, if the Raptors aren't an option, and the Lakers aren't an option, what is the option? Maybe the Clippers. Who knows? Who really knows? Jerry West. I mean, you cannot underestimate Jerry West, because you saw what he did with the Showtime Lakers and the pieces he brought in there, and you saw what he did in orchestrating the Lakers of the 2000 with Shaq and Kobe, and then of course he wasn't around for the back-to-back titles with Kobe and Gasol. He was out in Memphis at that point, and even the job he did in Memphis was pretty good. It wasn't up to the same standard of what he did in LA, but he was an advisor with the Warriors, and it's no surprise that everything fell into Jerry West. For all the bad luck he had as a player, we know his finals record. As an executive, he has been masterful. And maybe this was his plan all along for this free agency in terms of getting rid of Chris Paul and getting rid of Blake Griffin. Now, the flip side to that is, had they had the cap space and they had those guys, with the addition of Kawhi Leonard, that team would be right up there in terms of contending, because that's all they needed. I mean, they were desperate. They were bringing guys like Wesley Johnson or whoever to, Joe Ingles. They nearly kept him. Now, it would have been interesting because Joe Ingles has been very good out in Utah in the role that he plays. But it would have been very interesting to see how good they, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, and Kawhi Leonard, because they of course DeAndre Jordan as well, because the pieces appear to complement each other. So, but once again, would he really go to the Clippers? I could see that. I really could see that. Because even though that team has been disbanded, essentially, a Kawhi Leonard and potentially a Jimmy Butler, is that good enough? Maybe not to win a title, but definitely to reclaim LA as Clipper town, well, I mean, that would never happen. Even if they won a title, that would still be Lakers town, right? But in terms of who the better team is out of the Clippers and Lakers, you give me Jimmy Butler, you give me Kawhi Leonard. Those players, they're both two-way players, and I think they could play off each other quite well. And then you need to just surround yourself with decent role players, which there is no shortage of in the NBA. People want to talk about, the lack of competition, myself included. But if you are ascending as a team, the teams towards the bottom are so eager to tank, they're willing to give up their players. They're usually willing to give up their players plus additional assets to assist that tanking. So if they need a point guard, they could get a point guard. If they need a center, they could get a center. It's not that difficult because we've seen. I mean, how often do we see? Just look at the Warriors, for example. How quickly they got DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, they didn't need him, but they got him without any real issues. I mean, look at how they got Kevin Durant. They didn't even need him. So players find their ways, find a way to get on the team that suits them. And a team with Doc Rivers, who's still a great coach, maybe at one point he was very overrated, but he is a top-tier coach in the NBA still. Not on the top tier, but he's one of the top coaches. And then you've got the top executive in the league, in my opinion, in Jerry West. And then you'd also have Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard. That's a very appealing destination. And also the spotlight's not going to be on the Clippers because of the Lakers. Rightly or wrongly so. The only time the team plays, the fans, I'll get it right one day. The only time fans will actually take that seriously is when they're playing each other or if they're in a deep playoff run. So they're flying under the radar, but yet you still have the huge market. So the pressure and expectations and the burden isn't exactly on their shoulders. So I like the Clippers there for Kawhi Leonard coming to, in his free agency moves. Now, I just mentioned him a second ago, so it's only naturally that I'll talk about him now, and that's Jimmy Butler. And expect this situation to get a lot uglier before we reach its destination or its conclusion. Now, the options are that he gets traded to either New York or the Clippers in this offseason. And unless if he goes to the Clippers, I think he's gonna end up on the Clippers. I don't think he wants to play alongside LeBron, but he wants to be in LA. I think that's pretty obvious. And quite honestly, the Clippers seem to be a natural fit for him, with or without Kawhi Leonard. The only other thing I can think of is if he and Kyrie Irving are desperate to play alongside each other and they end up in New York. But that's a long shot. That's a huge long shot for them because that's such a gamble for the two of them because you don't know what Porzingis' health is going to be like and how he recovers from a pretty serious knee injury. So I think he's going to go to the Clippers, and I think the Clippers rebuild surprisingly a lot quicker than what the Lakers did with, despite all the hype being centered around LeBron and Magic Johnson. The other guy that I wanted to talk about was Klay Thompson, and Klay Thompson will be an unrestricted free agent. Now, if Kevin Durant leaves, that opens things back up to Klay Thompson being a significant piece of the Golden State offense and not merely a role player. See, what Klay Thompson's role right now is essentially just sugar, icing on the cake, essentially, because he can have a horrible game and the Warriors have enough offensive firepower, especially if DeMarcus Cousins fits into the system and is healthy, which I have huge doubts about, but it's a possibility. And Klay Thompson can have a shocking game and the Warriors will still win, convincingly. So there's no pressure on him. Maybe he likes that, but at some point you would think that this guy wants to at least test himself a little bit. And if Kevin Durant stays, nothing really changes, even if DeMarcus Cousins goes. And we'll talk about him in a second. So I would like to think that he would accept the challenge of leaving. But where would he go? Are the Lakers... I mean, we say this with every single player. The Lakers are a destination here. But the Lakers, does that fit for him? He's a willing and capable defender. Not a great defender, but he can defend, especially quicker guards. Great shooter. Catch and shoot guy too. More than anything. He doesn't really create his own shot. We don't know if that's in his repertoire because he's never really had to play that role. But what we do know is when Steph Curry was injured in the 2016 playoffs. This is before Kevin Durant was there. And Steph Curry was out for pretty much the first round and a big chunk of the second round. Klay Thompson stepped into the role as being the primary scorer for the Warriors, and he led the playoffs in scoring up until Steph Curry came back. We also know in Game 6, when they're down 3-2 to the Thunder, Game 6 in Oklahoma, he put together the greatest shooting performance in NBA history. I will go that far, without any hesitation. Not just playoff history, but NBA history, because so much was on the line. So I would like to see him in a role where he gets 20 touches, 20 shot attempts per game consistently. Now, will he go play alongside LeBron? Everyone seems to think that players want to play alongside LeBron, but we are seeing whether it's Paul George or Kawhi Leonard or Jimmy Butler recently, or Kyrie Irving, not that far removed from Kyrie Irving, forcing a trade to get away from LeBron. We have seen players that don't want to play alongside LeBron. Would Klay Thompson view this as like, this is ideal for me because all the pressure, not all the pressure, because there's no real pressure on LeBron. If he wins, he gets all the credit. If he loses, all his teammates get all the blame. But all the spotlight would be on LeBron. Is that what he wants? It's a possibility. And I think if Kevin Durant goes to San Antonio, Klay Thompson would stay in Golden State. But if Kevin Durant stays in Golden State, we could see Klay Thompson go down to the Lakers, and that would be an interesting fit. That would be a real interesting fit. That may be a better fit for them than a Jimmy Butler or a Kawhi Leonard. I would want to see how that would work out, because I think that could work. The play styles would actually fit in. People think of Klay Thompson as a player that is purely a complementary piece, and that's all he's really shown us over long periods of time. But that's the type of player that LeBron needs. Now, I don't know if LeBron is the type of player that Klay Thompson needs, but LeBron needs a Klay Thompson. And if the Lakers have any chance for competing for a title, they need somebody that can play alongside LeBron and his style. And we'll stick with the Warriors, and we'll talk about DeMarcus Cousins. A lot has been said about DeMarcus Cousins and his move to Golden State. A lot of it has not been positive. I don't think he really cares, which is also fine. I mean, it's his career to do what he wants, but people are allowed to have an opinion on it, right? Now, if they run through the league, which some people are expecting, and DeMarcus Cousins shows that he's healthy again and he's capable of fitting into a system, you can shoot him right up to the list, and he will be up there with Kawhi Leonard and Kyrie Irving as equally valuable as those guys, or interest from teams, because of the position he plays. There aren't a lot of big men in the league, quality big men. He won't be on Kevin Durant's level, but he'll be on that next tier with Kyrie Irving and Kawhi Leonard. Now, the point I'm going to make here is we don't know what even Golden State has. So it's almost impossible. If we don't even know what Golden State has, how are we meant to predict a year into the future? I will say this, though. Just like Klay Thompson, DeMarcus Cousins' game is almost tailor-fit for LeBron James, with the exception of he needs the ball in his hands that much, and he hasn't shown the ability to be to accept coaching. And LeBron is more than a coach; he's kind of like the boss. And if LeBron's the boss there, and DeMarcus Cousins has to answer to him, I mean, he hasn't shown the ability to even answer the coaches, like official coaches. So how is he going to respond to that? So that's a big question. But in terms of his ability to step outside and shoot jumpers, that's exactly what LeBron wants. That's exactly what LeBron needs to be successful. So if Kevin Durant stays, there's a big chance that Klay Thompson and DeMarcus Cousins both bolt to LA. And then the Lakers, all of a sudden, they could have their two big free agents. They could have Klay Thompson, DeMarcus Cousins, LeBron James. Plus, you've still got Brandon Ingram. And who knows what they've got with their other players, the Lonzo Balls. So, it's an interesting proposition, and all of a sudden the team will start to fill out. But I kind of think that, I can see it happening, but I don't think it's going to benefit any of the parties involved. In terms, on paper, they would look so much better with DeMarcus Cousins. I'm talking about the Lakers, obviously. But also, you've got to take into account that if DeMarcus Cousins is essentially the fifth option, because he's getting healthy, there's going to be some rust as well as the athletic rust. There'll be some skill rust too. So if he is just and also he's got to get used to the system. So if Kevin Durant stays, but Klay Thompson goes, DeMarcus Cousins will naturally, he'll go up the list in terms of options, in terms of scoring, not the ball in his hands, obviously, but scoring. With or without Klay Thompson, he will go past Draymond Green. But if Klay Thompson is gone, then he will be the third option. And they will be able to offer him quite a bit of money as well. So it's out of those two teams, I can't see a whole lot of teams really going after him, especially if he wants a short-term deal, even if he has a good season, because we saw what he is likely to do. Do you think New Orleans would have made that trade for him had they known that he could bolt to, the defending champions? Would it surprise anybody if he went to, say, Chicago for a year, 2 years, right? And then Chicago, they play all right, they make the playoffs, but Boston was won back-to-back titles, and then he signs a short-term deal for the minimum with Boston. Would it surprise you that he would do that based off what he just did with Golden State? It wouldn't surprise me. So maybe some teams are looking at him as, well, the talent is there. And this is assuming, once again, that everything goes well for him this year. So maybe they'll look at him and the attitude as well as being a question mark. I think it's out of those two teams, but I think he goes to the Lakers. But the other thing we've got to take into account is restricted free agents and Karl Anthony Towns. And based off what has happened during his career in the NBA, Minnesota might be getting sick of him, especially with his inability to play alongside guys like Wiggins or at least Jimmy Butler, who's proven himself at least on an all-star level. So because he's a restricted free agent, maybe, and I guess people are looking at, well, he's not going to sign anywhere else, but that's if Minnesota wants to keep him. That's a huge but at this stage. So if Minnesota decides they don't want to keep him, but there's some value there, we could see a trade with Karl Anthony Towns going to the Lakers. Maybe they offer Ingram for him. And that is a realistic opportunity. Because once again, just like he's like a younger DeMarcus Cousins, without the attitude, but also without the passion, it looks like, at least. Because for everything that is said about DeMarcus Cousins, he goes around about things the wrong way, but I think he wants to win. And evidence of that is him going to Golden State. He didn't just go to somewhere where he'll get a lot of minutes when he is healthy. He went to somewhere where he probably will get a lot of minutes, but his production won't be high. He could have gone to Chicago. He could have gone to a place like that where, once he was healthy, hell, he could have stayed in New Orleans, unless if the reports are true that Anthony Davis did not want him back. But he could have gone to places like that. He could have gone to Houston and come off the bench, or not even come off the bench, but when he was healthy, started alongside Capella. The point I'm making is Karl Anthony Towns has not shown that kind of dedication to winning. This is the same guy that we barely see shoot the ball in games. And, a lot of that has to do with how many touches he gets, but he's got to demand the ball. It's almost reminiscent of Dwight Howard in terms of the frustration. But his skill set would be perfect for, once again, playing alongside LeBron. And it might even be a better fit than DeMarcus Cousins, because I don't think he needs the ball in his hands as much, but the guy can shoot. So that is what LeBron needs. So we could see a situation where Karl Anthony Towns, because he's a restricted free agent, ends up getting moved because Minnesota has had enough of him. The other restricted free agent I'm not even going to really talk about is Porzingis. I don't think he's going anywhere. Next up is Kemba Walker, and once again, he seems like a pretty loyal dude. He's never requested a trade or anything like that. But at some point, Charlotte has to realize how far are they going to get with this guy. And he's got to view it in the same circumstance. I think he's comfortable in Charlotte. However, if the Hornets feel it's time to rebuild, they may trade him rather than letting him go to free agency and letting him walk for nothing. And there are plenty of teams that would be very interested in a Kemba Walker. He produces very well for that team. He's one of the better point guards in the league. And to be a top 10 point guard in the league means you're a top 20, 25 player in the league overall. And in my opinion, he's a top 10 point guard in the league. So I could see him going to... There's quite a variety of teams that could use his services. But one team that nobody's really talking about is maybe New Orleans. And if they can orchestrate a trade to offload some pieces, and if, of course, Charlotte is fire sailing the team or the talent, man, New Orleans, if they're able to get Kemba Walker alongside Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday, that they shoot right up. Because I've always said that the top two teams in the West are obviously Golden State and Houston. And then you've got the next tier, which is Utah, Oklahoma City, and New Orleans. And then after that, you got everyone else, which is quite a logjam. And, of course, when I say everyone else, I'm talking about playoff contenders. I'm not talking about Phoenix. But if the Pelicans are able to snag Kemba Walker for virtually nothing, then they shoot right up to the top echelon of teams in the West and in the NBA overall. It's almost more interesting to see where he will end up by the end of the season as opposed to where he will end up in the off-season. So that's pretty much it. I think I covered everybody. You know what? I didn't cover Al Horford because I don't think he's going to opt out. And because it'd be crazy to opt out if you're him. I don't think he's worth $30 million, and that's what he's scheduled to get paid. And he seems happy in Boston, as he should. That's a perfect environment, perfect coaching, perfect talent around him, young talent that's coming up. I would be shocked if he went elsewhere. And I think that covers everybody. As you can see, the NBA is totally different. You've got Kevin Durant going to San Antonio. You've got Kawhi Leonard and Jimmy Butler going to the Clippers. You've got Klay Thompson, DeMarcus Cousins going to the Lakers. You've got Kyrie Irving staying put. I mean, there's so many... The changes to the NBA is unbelievable when you look at the potential to all this. I mean, I didn't even mention Tobias Harris. And he's still on the Clippers, obviously. But what if he ends up in Philly? You know what I mean? What if they have to make some room for Kawhi Leonard and they fire sale him and he ends up in Philly? My goodness. And if Fultz comes around as well, so then you'd have a lineup of Embiid, Simmons, Fultz, and Tobias Harris. And you might think, well, who cares about Tobias Harris? He had a hell of a season last year. He was essentially traded straight up for Blake Griffin, and the Clippers got the better deal. So that would be huge if that happened. But it's, I'm glad that I covered this because this is a once-in-a-generation free agency class. And I know we get that, like, people will say, oh, look ahead to this class, look ahead to that class, and it's 2 or 3 years in advance, and nothing really happens. But when you look at this class that's coming up, there's so much depth to it. And it's not 1 or 2 players. It's 10, 15 players deep that could change everything. Just look at what I said about Karl Anthony Towns, for example. Yes, he's a restricted free agent. But if the Minnesota Timberwolves do not want him, remember, it's reciprocal. Either the team, it's not where the player wants to go. Maybe the team doesn't want him, or they're not interested, or they want to move in a new direction. So say if he goes to the Lakers mid-season, all of a sudden, DeMarcus Cousins doesn't go there. So once again, and where does DeMarcus Cousins go at that point? Does he end up in Houston? Who knows? Who really knows? There's so many variables that change the entire landscape of the NBA. All it takes is 1 or 2 of these moves that we won't even pick up at the time that changes everything. Absolutely everything. And there's even guys like Terry Rozier that I didn't even touch on. I mean, at what point can the Celtics, if they do re-sign Kyrie Irving, there's no chance they're going to be able to keep Terry Rozier. And maybe he ends up on the Clippers. Remember I was saying before, there's no shortage of players if you're a team that's ascending. They will find a way to end up. So they could end up with that as a nucleus. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. It was impromptu. There wasn't any notes prepared. You probably tell that I was, lack of editing as well, because I was just going through the emails. I noticed a lot of emails on this topic. I thought, why not just squash it all in one topic? So here we are. Next week we'll have the mailbag. I guarantee you, next week we'll have the mailbag. And there's a lot of questions in here, ranging from historical ones to contemporary ones. So I look forward to answering those. That may end up being a mailbag week. We may do 2 episodes on it, depending on how long it actually goes for. But thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy your weekend. And if you're a Browns fan, enjoy your Super Bowl. This is your first win in, I don't know. Actually, you know what? How long it's been since the Browns won a game? The last time I was here in the United States, as opposed to, I'm not going to count Hawaii. Hawaii does not feel like the United States, even though they use their currency. I guess you got to, but they use the currency in Cancun too, and that's not part of the United States. The last time they won a game was in 2016. One single game, and I watched it on TV, and RG3 was their quarterback. So Ohio is a very proud state right now because they got a win, and it was a great win too. Let's see what happens with Baker Mayfield. That will be interesting. And that defense, I'm glad I picked them up in fantasy. I know nobody wants to talk about fantasy sports anymore, but I'm so glad that I picked up not Baker Mayfield, but the Browns defense early on. People laughed at me. When I say early on, people, this is before, great defenses were selected. And I figured the speed on their defense, and they're young, they're going to need to keep the Browns offense in a lot of those games. And now I've jinxed them. So I guess the Browns will be going 1 win, 1 tie, and 14 losses. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you on Monday. Monday. Monday will be the next episode, and I'll see you then.